the West Coast, the East Coast, and deep in the heart of Texas. It's the Geek at Arms podcast with Brian, Mike, and James.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Geek at Arms podcast, a podcast camped squarely at the crossroads of geek culture and Christian faith. I'm James, and as always, my buds are with me, Mike and Brian. And with us, a very special guest. She was with us on episode 26, and she's making her return on episode 46 of Geek at Arms. It's Bex from Redeemed Otaku. Bex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I can't believe it's been 20 episodes or so. Feels like it's been 20 years.
I mean, I think what it is that we just have to watch more anime. I think that's the answer.
Okay. Yes. Of course.
I don't know. Whenever you bring up animes like Dude Does Not Dream of a Bunny Girl, whatever, I think you watch enough anime. I've seen the wiki page for that, and I'm still coming to grips that exists.
You said you wouldn't judge me on the air.
Oh, everyone knows that's not true.
Anybody who's listened to this podcast knows it's not true.
In case someone out there actually missed that past episode, Bex, tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and where people can find you online.
Well, sure. I host the podcast, which is a little bit on a hiatus. It's called Redeemed Otaku. What we try to do is we review, discuss anime from a Christian worldview and try to remind Christians that anime is cool, but Jesus is better. But you can find me on pretty much any podcatcher. We're on iTunes. But also you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and on YouTube as well. Just look up Redeemed Otaku and I'll be there.
Very cool. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Mike, how are you today, my friend?
I am doing pretty well. How about you, James?
Better. Rough week for me. Still getting over a bit of the strep throat, which anytime you get sick in this day and age, because of the era we live in, our minds automatically go to the worst thing. And I was sick. Other members of my family were sick. Anytime, like in the past, after Thanksgiving, someone in the family gets sick. Of course, now we all think like, oh my gosh, COVID. But I went in and thankfully just strep throat. So yeah, I'll take that. Today's like the first day that I feel mostly human. Not all the way human. I don't think I ever truly feel that, but mostly human.
Like, imagine listening to this episode several years in the past. Thankfully, it was strep throat.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a paranoia about illness, and so my brain always jumps to something like, oh my God, it's the Andromeda strain.
But
Brian begins looking to see if there were any meteor strikes in his area recently. But Brian, you doing all right?
Well, it has been 21 days since our last accidental drowning, so yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
should we be laughing at that?
Yeah, like, okay, episode
context, please.
Okay, look, I just listened to the last episode today, so that's fresh in my mind because we made him laugh while he was taking a drink of water, and he nearly died in episode.
And I just wanted to put down for the record, I apologize for nothing.
Oh, yes. You should not. That was a hilarious comment.
Well, let's head to Geek Out. So, as is usual, Bex, you get first crack at it. So, what have you been geeking out to recently?
Oh, well, I've been playing this game. It actually came out 25 years ago, so it's a little retro. It was
We don't
really...
do retro here.
Oh, okay. It was, it was a little popular back then. You might have heard of it. It's called Pokemon.
Are you playing the
original? Yeah, Pokemon. That's that Digimon copy, right?
Yeah. No. But this year they're celebrating their 25th anniversary, and I did play Pokemon, the card game, back late 90s. So I still have a lot of my old cards, but I've been jumping back into it and opening new cards, and I've been actually recording videos and putting them on YouTube of card openings, playing the game again. I pulled out my old DS and started playing through Platinum, and funnily, the Diamond and Pearl just got re-released just a few weeks ago. So that's been a lot of fun too. But yeah, I'm super into Pokemon and having a blast with it.
So in your opening videos, has there been a card that when you saw it, you got legitimately jazzed about, that you like, oh my gosh, I got this card, holy cow?
So it's a lot of fun to open the cards just in general, right? Because I like the surprise. I like the act of opening the cards. But it really is something special when you open a like ultra rare or hyper rare. And I did get one, and now it's called a rainbow rare, and I was not expecting it, and it was like the second pack that I opened, and it just tickled me. I just started laughing because it was so unexpected. And I'm like, it's a rainbow rare. I got a rainbow rare.
What was the card? Yeah. Is it good? Is it playable?
It is a trainer card. Her name is Caitlin. I don't know if it's playable in like the competition Pokemon, but it can have some uses, but I don't think it's going to be it's a very distinct play for the trainer, and I don't find any use for it in my style of playing. So it's kind of advanced, and I don't really play with it. But the fact is, it's a cool card, and I got it, and I was so excited.
See, I think we need more of that in Magic the Gathering, Brian. Like, we know the pleasure and the joy of opening up packages in that game as well, but we don't get like the super shiny foils and the custom art. Like, check it out, I got a hyper laser foiled Bright Steel Colossus.
Oh, that's right. Magic is the artwork is all the same. They don't do hollows on that or anything, do they?
They
do
have like
cards.
the foil, yeah.
Oh, they do some like promotional cards with alternate art. They've been doing something lately called what do they call it? Secret Lair, where they do crossover IP stuff. So they released a couple of cards that were based on Stranger Things.
Oh, wild!
Yeah, and what was interesting is those were actually published ahead of the cards that they're replacing. So the cards that they're eventually going to be don't exist. So all you've got right now is Sheriff Hopper and 11. Mm-hmm. But eventually they're going to be something else that are going to have those same mechanics on them.
What actually pulled me back to buying my first Magic cards in decades was when Magic did a crossover with Toho and printed Godzilla monster cards.
That exists?
That exists. Yes.
Really?
I have a Godzilla Magic card, and
No
it's one of my favorite things in the world. I'm not going to admit how many packs I had to buy until I got him, but I wasn't going to stop until I got him.
Does he destroy other people's lands?
Only one specific island.
Okay.
Nice. So it's funny you say Magic because I've been getting into Pokemon. My husband, he's like, well, I want to open cards, so can I start buying Magic cards?
Yeah.
So he's been buying Magic cards, and we actually did a couple videos of opening that as well. And he's super into the online game Arena, and man, it's way too advanced for me. I don't want to say confused, but I get overwhelmed, and then I start making mistakes and I lose the game. So
yeah, I've played tournaments like in way back in the day. I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and I wanted to go someplace to meet people, so I'm like, tournaments sound like a thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know a lot about the game, but oh man, did I learn fast, because a lot of stuff happened real quick. I'm like, okay, when did I lose?
Right. What just happened? Yeah.
Mike, you didn't believe in the heart of the cards.
Like, look, I spent so much time at antique shops looking for these artifacts. I didn't know the answer was to just buy more cards instead.
That's right. It's always buy more cards. So another thing that I've been geeking out on is Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, that was a show.
Yeah. So I didn't watch this when it first aired. I think it was because we were just married and we didn't have a lot of TV options. But we just discovered it on Hulu, and it is, to me, the greatest show because it reminds me a lot of my childhood. And so it's very nostalgic, and there's a lot of similarities between how we were raised and the parenting style and how the kids kind of act and act up. So we are just me and my husband are just having a blast with it. So I think we're in season 3 now, but yeah, super good show. Absolutely love it.
I loved that show when it was on, and the fact that the opening is done by They Might Be Giants is just icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm. But that's all that I've been geeking out on. How about you, Brian? What are you geeking out on?
Well, I brought up last episode that I had been preparing a traveler campaign and had been entering data into Roll20. I decided that the character sheets that are available on Roll20 are inadequate for what I wanted to do. So I have spent the last week and a half or so creating a new character sheet. And this is the first time that I've built one from scratch in Roll20, and I think it's like I've put a lot of work in it, so I'm probably going to publish it eventually.
That was going to be my suggestion. I bet you're going to find people who find it more useful than what's currently out there.
Mm-hmm. Because the only existing ones, there's one for Mongoose Traveler, and there's one for Classic, and they're both, I mean, they're fine. They work, but there's so much more information that you can put on it. And that you kind of need during play. And none of them, well, the Classic Traveler one doesn't have any die rolling integrated into it. And I wanted to add that. So I bit off a little bit more than I can chew, to be honest, just because there is so much information. And I haven't done I know as soon as I publish it, somebody's going to say, oh, can you add a ship record sheet to it too? So I need to get out ahead of that and just go ahead and make the ship record sheet before I release the thing.
Anticipate the complaining. That's
right.
A good mindset.
These are skills that I learned as a visual effects artist. Well, I know what note's going to come as soon as I submit this, so I'm just going to go ahead and build in a way to address that note now. So that's occupied quite a bit of my free time, and that which has not been occupied by Traveler has been occupied by all of the new geeky shows that have come out the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like after such a dry spell, we're kind of under an avalanche right now.
Yeah, they dropped all of them at the same time. I'm caught up on Hawkeye. I was not sold in the first 2 episodes, but the latest one was so good.
See, Joy and I have only watched the first episode of that, and I still enjoyed it. It didn't grab me, but I feel like there's so much better on the way.
Yeah, give it a little time, because this week's was tremendous. I loved it so much. I've watched the first 2 episodes of that Cowboy Bebop live-action adaptation.
How'd you like it?
I'm really liking the casting.
Yeah.
The characters, I think, are really hitting it correctly, unlike the Death Note adaptation, which was just incorrect.
It's called reinterpretation.
No, it was just incorrect.
Like, it's interesting. We talk about consuming media. We don't really talk about tickling the back of the throat and regurgitating it.
If I have a complaint about Cowboy Bebop, it's that the editing seems a little weird. It's like that the anime is very kinetic. It's really snappy.
And it's tight.
Very tight. But the live action is like I feel like I can hear the fight choreographer counting 1, 2, 3, 4, because they like pause and get a pose at the end of every move during a fight. And it's like, no, you should be cutting on action. Let this thing flow and be chaotic and kinetic, not I'm going to move and then stop, and then I'm going to move and stop and move and stop.
It's funny because it struck me differently. I kind of liked being able to see where they were in terms of their pause points, because there are pause points in fighting scenes. They're usually not this long, but getting that moment to appreciate the structure of what they're doing and I guess where they end in their movements is something that's satisfying to me. So I fully recognize what you're saying, but it's interesting that just on a subjective level, it hit me differently.
That is interesting. Yeah, and there's plenty of room for taste and preference there. It's just, it doesn't feel as energetic to me as I thought that it should. And I had the same kind of experience in the opening title scene.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like the animated titles were just, you're barely keeping up with the imagery you're seeing. And on this one, it's like, we want to make sure everybody sees and understands every cut. And it doesn't quite work for me. But the dialogue has been spot on. The casting is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to giving it more time. And my understanding is that they left Ed out until the very last episode, which I approve of because that's my least favorite character. I made an enemy of the entire listenership of Retro Rewind with that opinion, but
look, I interacted with the anime differently than you on that aspect, but that's what Retro Rewind is there for. Is
exactly.
Like, you give them your tragic maker, and it doesn't have to be anything anybody else dislikes. It's there, and that one's yours.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you had said Ein, we probably would have kicked you off this episode.
Right?
Oh, I don't think anybody could say that. I mean, come on.
Right.
And then crowning that trio of new shows is The Wheel of Time.
Finally.
Yes, I know James and I are crossing over a little bit on this one. Okay, first impressions. Again, the casting, I think, is spot on. Mm-hmm. A lot of the visual language that they're using, like the Wine Spring Inn looked exactly like it does in my imagination. It was like, I don't know how they got into my skull and pulled that image out, but there it was.
Honestly, I liked their interpretation of the Wine Spring Inn better than what I had in my mind.
And I've really liked the ceremonial aspects of the show, which are not in the book as much. Mm-hmm. Like the whole the braiding ceremony.
When Egwene is inducted into the women's circle.
Right. Which
yes.
Jordan just said, no, it's private, it's secret. The men don't get to know about it. And that's all we ever knew. But the show, gave that to us. And it was like, oh, wow, this is something that makes the culture deeper and richer. And then at the end of the most recent episode, there's a terrific ceremonial scene that, we were talking earlier about things that make us cry. I was crying during that scene. And I don't want to give any spoilers because that episode's only a couple of days old at this point. But
yeah, Joy and I have not watched the latest episode, so thank you.
So I will not say any more about that. One thing I do wish is that it was a little more difficult to tell exactly who's going to die in a given episode. Because oh, look, there's an Aes Sedai whose name I don't recognize. She's not lasting to the end of this episode.
Oh, in the credits, he's warder number 1. And there's a hint.
Okay, so I've not had any real exposure to Wheel of Time. So without having read the books, with only having the vaguest notion about the books, is this something that I should check out?
I think so, yeah. My sister has been watching it with her family, and her husband's never read the books, and he's been enjoying it. I think that somebody who is very familiar with the books is going to have a much better experience, just because we see all of the little hints and things. It's like, and we know what's coming. And even things like a lot of people are complaining about some of the changes in the characters. And some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. Like the character Perrin was not married in the books, but at the beginning of the show he is. And it's like, oh, I don't know if I like that. I really wanted to see, his Master Luhan, his blacksmithing master, instead of this wife that came out of nowhere. But as I got to thinking about it, is like, no, that actually makes a much stronger motivation for what his struggle is all the way through than he ever had in the books. So I think some of the changes that they've made are really good. Some of them are just for the sake of, hey, we've only got 8 episodes to tell the first novel's worth of stories. We're probably going to skip a couple of cities.
Which is wise.
Yes. I was like, do we really need to see Barillon? I mean, some important stuff happens there, but we can put that elsewhere. Mm-hmm. I was a little surprised they skipped Caemlyn, because that cuts out like 5 important characters. But on the other hand, if they had stopped there, I don't know, we wouldn't have seen some of the other stuff that they wanted to show us. So there's pluses and minuses to it, but overall, I'm really liking it. The only thing that I really would complain about would be the visual effects on the Trollocs. I didn't think were very persuasive.
See, I liked the Trollocs. My worry was that we were going to get furry humans with some horns glued on.
Yeah, it could have been much, much worse.
And I think that was the bar I had set. And
I mean, I've seen some pretty good furry costumes, so
I cannot believe we are on the same wavelength for that one.
and those are horrific enough, but
leave the furries alone. They get their own niche.
I will happily leave them alone. Anyway, moving on. My bar was set very low, and I was just like, please just don't be dudes wrapped up in furry jackets. And what I saw was very visceral and grotesque looking and frightening. I also enjoyed that we got different types of Trollocs. We got the ones that human faces but horns on their head, beaks, wolf snouts, warthogs. Some ran on all fours, some stood up and ran, some had legs, some had hooves. So I saw the variety, and that was way beyond what I was expecting with this show.
Yeah, I liked the designs. It was the rendering, I think, that put me out, and the animation.
That's fair.
But that's, professional quibbles, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Your eye is more trained to see that bit of minutia. But I honestly thought that this was a series that was never going to come. I never thought we were going to get a Wheel of Time TV show. Brian, you introduced me to this series over 20 years ago. Thank you, you jerk. And he introduced me to the series when it had just wrapped up like book 6. And how many novels have there been total?
I think they hit 20.
Yeah, something like that.
21.
Well, Google is our friend.
Yeah.
There's 20 of them?
There's a lot, yes.
Oh my goodness. See, I've only read to like book
there
9,
are 14.
I think it was. 14, okay.
Yeah, 14. 11 written by Jordan, and the last 3 were by Brandon Sanderson.
15 if you count New Spring.
Okay, so we'll say 15. So yeah, he got me at, there's 6 of these books. 9 books later. That's when it finally wrapped up. So, I mean, I can remember Brian and I having late night conversations about if they ever made a movie or TV show, who we thought would play each character. And this tells about the time period what decade we were discussing these in, because I thought Heath Ledger would make a fantastic Rand. But when I heard that they were going to be doing this show, I was really happy, but I was also very scared. My biggest fear was that what we were going to get was an updated version of... Did anyone here ever watch the CW's Shannara series?
No, I never saw that.
I tried.
I never saw every episode.
I tried to watch that, and I couldn't.
I think I watched about half of the first one.
Yeah, and that was my fear, was that we were going to get a new CW-style show, but this time with a property that I dearly loved.
To be fair, the Shannara novels aren't really stellar either.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See, I never read the novels, but my wife and I started watching these and we're like, oh, this is too corny. Play another one. Like, what did we talk about last episode? I forget. Oh yeah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Like, we knew it wasn't good, but it's like, still, I'm on board. I watched all of season 1, never went to season 2. My thing was, like, there were these people standing around in armor and somebody would throw a knife and they still die. It's like, why do you bother to wear that? I mean, get something more effective like cardboard.
They got it at the same place that stormtroopers get their gear. So all this joking is, one of the biggest reasons why I was scared that Wheel of Time would turn out that way. But when I finally saw the first couple of episodes, I was very happy. I didn't really have any major gripes. The design is beautiful. I also, because I love medieval books and I love medieval history and even medieval fantasy, all of the color of the costuming in this show is beautiful. The designs pulling from so many different cultures. It's beautiful to look at. It made me so happy to see.
Yeah, their costuming department is going all out.
Yes, they are. And finally, we get a great fantasy series that isn't designed by 50 Shades of Brown.
See, medieval clothing, that's why I listen to Geek at Arms.
There's a lid for every pot, Mike. Well, except in my apartment.
Yeah. I was happy when they finally introduced one of my favorite characters in the book, Tom Marilyn. And
gosh, he was good.
When I first saw him, I was like, oh, okay, interesting take on his costume. After he's done with this, is he going to go hang out with Oliver Twist? Because the get up and the coat that they put on him does have that late 1800s London look to it.
Yeah.
And very Victorian, but he opens up his jacket and you see the patchwork lining on it. Okay, clever take on a Gleeman's cloak. But then he sings that song. I'm like, okay, that's just a bit of Johnny Cash in that, and I'm down for it. I am so down for it. And then he comes out with the throwing knives later. I'm like, okay, all right, I buy it. I'm in. I love him again.
I am so confused, and I'm not mad about it.
Honestly, my only real gripe, I hate the costume that they put on Lan.
Oh, yeah?
It's not, I'm sorry, it looks like someone belted pajamas on the man.
The actor was very specific that he wanted something Korean inspired.
Okay, fair. I get that. And they just look like tactical jammies to me.
Tactical jammies. I love it.
I feel like I could sell those.
Start an Etsy. You got it.
Tacta jammies from Geek at Arms.
Pants and Arrows production.
Roll for pants.
I still need to make that t-shirt.
But honestly, if my only major gripe is one character's garb, then I think the show is doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if they can continue in this level of quality. And I think with the amount of money that Amazon is throwing at it, that it will continue setting a high bar.
What was your knee-jerk reaction to Tuatha on Rumspringa? Because that bugged me. No.
I liked the look of their wagons. I liked the choice of costuming. The fact that they decided to give them a Rumspringa, I thought was weird.
And it kind of ruins a little bit of Aram's characterization, what happens with him later on.
Yeah, it does. And I'm like, I'm sorry, did you just turn them Amish? I don't know. I thought they were okay. They were like, I always considered them to be like a minor part of the books.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why not a huge amount of work went into them. So, I mean, I guess I'm all right with the fact that they were meh.
Yeah. I did really like Isla's description of the Way of the Leaf. I thought the writers explained that much better than Jordan ever did.
Mm-hmm. The liberties that the writers have taken so far, I've enjoyed. Like with the description of the Way of the Leaf, of the Tinkers, the ceremony that you talked about at the very beginning of the show. Like I shared with my wife, you can tell that these people have really, really done their homework. And they have a lot of respect for the source material, and the additions that they are making are very much in the spirit of the world.
And if they have to make compromises for television, they're making the right ones.
Agreed. I guess my next biggest fear is another favorite character of mine that we have not seen yet, and I'm really, really curious about his design, how it's going to translate to screen, and that is, I always mess up his name, Lowell?
I think it's just Loyal. Yeah, I was not sold. I'll give him some more time, but the character design didn't do it for him.
Did he show up in the latest episode?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't seen it yet. I'm hoping to watch it tonight. Last night's viewing was all about something we'll get to here soon, but I'll wait and see. I'll give a report next episode.
Yes. Well, that's about all I had to say. So I'll turn it over to you, James.
Well, let me start off with the Wheel of Time.
Oh, I loved that show. It's been
wasn't it great? Yeah. Okay, Bex, in all honesty, if you were not a guest today, this episode would have been named James and Brian Spend 2 hours talking about Wheel of Time while Mike chews popcorn in the background quietly.
Like, if there was a way that I could whisper across my, Bex, do you have any idea what's going on?
Well, I've read I think up to 9, book 9, but I have not watched the show. So all the stuff that you're talking about, I know because I've read, especially the first book. I've read that about 3 times.
Mhm.
But as far as the show and how they interpreted it, I have not seen it. So I'm a little bit ahead of the game on you there, Mike. So sorry.
So your answer is clearly, Mike, you have no idea what's going on. Try and catch up, dude. Like,
Yeah, when they got to Shadar Logoth, they were talking about, the Trolloc Wars, and
Oh man, I could talk about the Manetheren speech too, but let's not go there.
so are we gonna
last thing I'm going to say about that is I did enjoy when they were our main party was riding along the road, and Matt starts off a song, and they all join in together.
That was nice.
It has a feel of an old folk song that they all know and they've all grown up hearing, and you find out it's about Manetheren. Beautiful moment. Is it in the books? I think in a way it's in the books, but they interpreted it differently and made it a song they sing on the road. But a beautiful, well-done scene that gives a lot of context and history without feeling like just pure exposition.
And it shows a little bit more of the relationship of these people. They're all from the same village, and they've got the same shared experience.
Mm-hmm. Moving on from Wheel of Time, finally.
If we can.
Really? Are we actually going to? Because I know that MinMax just did 10 episodes on their fantasy book series. I was wondering if you guys are going to do the same.
Yeah, well, and they've only got 2 books to work with over there.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doomed.
We'll wrap this up. See, this was episode 46. We'll wrap this up in episode 108. That ought to get us through the...
Fires of Heaven, at least.
Fires of Heaven, at least, yeah. So, next up in My Geek Out, not long ago, got to see Ghostbusters Afterlife in the theaters.
Oh, my
gosh.
gosh.
And what a fantastic movie. You talk about treating nostalgia right. Mike, sounds like you've seen it. Anyone else?
I want to see it. I just have not gotten time to see this. I didn't realize it was out yet. I'm a little disconnected right now.
Yeah, it's probably there and gone already in most theaters.
It came out November 19th, so...
Oh, wow. I am super behind the time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Bex, what about you?
No, I have not watched it yet.
Holy cow, people, come on.
I know. I love Ghostbusters. I even...
Yeah.
I want to see this.
First off, the story and plot are very well done. This isn't a reimaging. This is a direct sequel. And it deals with their legacy. It deals with family. The casting on it, so good. The 2 that stand out the most to me are the character of Phoebe, who we find out is Egon's granddaughter. And you look at her for more than 2 seconds, you realize, oh, she's related to Egon. You can picture her saying, I collect spores, mold, and fungus. She is delightful. She is so good in this movie. She carries so much of it. And Paul Rudd, and he's Paul Rudd. He's just going to be good, okay?
Go wrong.
Yeah. All of the casting is really tight, as is the storytelling. It's a modern movie, modern effects, but it has that feeling and has that spirit of the original 80s movies. And I won't go too much into it because I really don't want to spoil anything for anyone here. But once you go see it, or whether it's in the theater, whether it's on Amazon or however, you're going to enjoy it. They put so many, I won't even call them Easter eggs because, I mean, they're just details alluding to the first movies, connections that are made of the overall lore. And the people who made this, you can tell that this was a labor of love for all of them. The first scene was very action-packed, but speaking of moments that like almost make you cry for a second, it did that to me. I'm like, stupid ghost hunting movie making you tear up in the theater.
I don't know what you mean. Anything about movies making you cry? I didn't see the movie that we're discussing.
Not at all. Hopefully next episode you all have seen it, and we can talk more about it then. And Bex, let us know what you think of it, because I always love to hear your opinion. And my last bit of geek out was on the lookout for something new to read, and a friend in one of the many medieval forums that I belong to on Facebook recommended a book by author Mel Starr called The Unquiet Bones. And it's about a 14th century man named Hugh, who he's the fourth son of a minor knight. And he's been educated as a clerk, which means his father probably doesn't even know his name.
That's right. See, when you said that in the peerage, like, so he's going to be clergy, right?
You think that. Yeah, because fourth son, minor, even a major knight or a major noble, fourth son. Has anyone here besides me seen the old BBC series Blackadder?
Parts of it.
It's an early work by Rowan Atkinson before his Mr. Bean days.
Okay. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Wonderful comedy. It has Brian Blessed in it. And in the first episode, all these people are at feast, and the king looks at his, man just left and goes, "Who is that weird man there at the end of the table? I will ask my son, my lord. Who is that at the end of the table? That is your other son, my lord. That is my other son, my lord." And made me think that this is what poor Hugh's life must be like. Fourth son, minor knight. He's been educated as a clerk. He's supposed to take on holy orders, but he doesn't really want to. So he turns to the medical field, and he trains to become a surgeon in Paris. He, hangs up his shingle in Oxford. And once a body is found, he is given the task of discovering how she was murdered and finding her killer. So it is a 14th century murder mystery, very much in the same vein as the Brother Cadfael series, which I adore.
I love those too.
When I found out about this book, and there are several other books by this author, and it's a bit more modern than the Cadfael book. Cadfael, good books, fantastic TV show starring Sir Derek Jacobi. And these were all written in like 2008 and up till now. So I'm really looking forward to reading it, and I'll give a more in-depth review in episodes to come. And that will wrap it up for me. Mike, what about you?
I've got kind of a slim geek month, but I did actually. I'm deviating from the notes here, so buckle up, everybody. Yeah, I actually got a really.
Could happen.
I know. I got a really exciting invitation to come talk about a book that I've recently been reading, and I don't know if it's going to be like, we haven't talked about the exact direction yet, but it'll be released before our episode is released. So head on over to the MinMax podcast. They're fantastic, and I was just elated that they came and asked me if I could come on and talk a little bit about Dune. So, which I've written papers on in the past, and I enjoy the work. So yeah, this is just a really exciting opportunity.
Did you tell us that you were going to do that?
I did not. I found out yesterday. So yeah, Alan reached out over Twitter yesterday. So I'm like, I'm going to be seeing the guys tomorrow. So I'll just forget about the fact that I was going to talk about Animal Crossing again, because I mean, it's been around for a while. You guys know it's there. Like you're either crossing the animals or you're not. So, yeah, the only other thing that's going on for me is I thought I'd share a little bit of just fun that I had at work with work geekery. We just had our really big accreditation site visit at work, which if you do anything with academics, you know that your 10-year review to see if you can actually still call yourself a school is really, really stressful on a lot of people. Everybody's doing 20 times as much work just to make sure everything is perfect and all the documents are ready for the review team. And our vice president just burned the midnight oil so many nights and put in a lot of work. And after it was done, I had said, man, somebody ought to give her a medal. Like, why don't I? And so I just kind of looked on eBay and I thought, well, wait a minute. She's a super huge Star Wars fan. Why don't we just get weird with this? And I ordered a replica of the medal that they gave Han and Luke at the end of A New Hope. And so when she was on campus again, because naturally you take a vacation after that, we had somebody like pull up Spotify and hit play on my phone of the throne room medal scene. And she's like listening to the video like, what is going on? And I just said, well, in honor of the work that you've done recently, we are here to present to you the rebellion's highest honor. And I pull it out of the box and she just about dies laughing. And she wore it all morning. It was fantastic.
That's great.
I kind of wish that you had put a Post-it note on it when you open the box. You see the medal, and on the Post-it note it said, "For Chewbacca." And he rip off the poster. Ignore that. Don't worry about that.
I was like, hey, Chewie didn't get a medal. She got a medal, though. But you earned it. What's funny is she posted it on social media thinking like, ah ha ha, like this is Mike was being hilarious. This is such a funny joke. People didn't really look at the text, and they just saw that she was wearing a medal and that it was catching the light just right. And people were like, congratulations on the award you won.
I don't know why, but the fact that replicas of that exist make me so happy.
I mean, they were just made for an opportunity like this.
Well, I want a replica of that orb thing at the end of episode 1.
Oh, that Boss Nass holds up over his head.
Oh,
right.
Wow. Yeah, the problem is they probably weren't even holding a silver ball at that point on set, were they?
Well, Brian, you work in digital effects. You just make your own. You take a video of yourself and digitally insert it above your head.
And then I'll print it.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's
Post
just
it on
as
Instagram.
satisfying. Yeah, it's like the real thing, only paperier.
We should get an official Geek at Arms 3D printer.
James, you know we would just be making minis with it all the time for characters we have no intention of playing.
Yeah, what's your point?
I was just asking if you're going to make the Black Bolt character that Bex referenced the last time she was on.
Well, that's number 1 now.
But that'll wrap it up for me for Geek Out.
Well, then let's head to our main topic. We are wrapping up our second animated film club, and we are going to be taking a look at the movie Your Name. And I'm going to let one of you tell us more about this movie, because up until last night, I had never seen it. And I had no idea on the impact this movie had on the Japanese and Asian movie market. I mean, it hit like a proverbial comet.
Yeah, I think it beat out Spirited Away as far as financial gain. Is that what it is? Or ticket sales, something like that?
Box office sales.
Box office sales. That's the term I was looking for.
I do remember reading that it held the number 1 spot for like 10, 12 weeks. And then it lost its number 1 spot to of all things, a Death Note anime movie for 1 weekend. And then it came back and took the number 1 spot for 2 more weekends until it finally lost to a Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, I think it was number 1 in box office sales until the Demon Slayer movie came around. Like in total box office sales, not like still number 1 at the theater. That would be impressive.
Right. People like good movies.
Yeah. The only thing I can say about introducing this film is like, we're watching it finally.
Finally.
This is probably my very favorite film.
Not just anime film, but favorite film, period?
Period.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice. So I didn't watch it right away. This was my first viewing of it. So thank you very much for giving me a reason to watch it. I tend to be a little contrarian, and I don't mean to be. So when something is popular, I don't rush out to watch it along with the masses. But I knew that it was good. I just had this natural aversion to just watching it. So yes, it is great. I watched it. I loved it. I own it. And I'll probably watch it several more times again. So
Okay, so I guess there's always the question that we're asking with our film club films. Why this film?
Well, I know primarily it was because you begged us to watch it.
Yeah. When we were discussing what movies we wanted to do for the second film club, I would make a suggestion, and then you'd go, and Your Name. Brian would make a suggestion. Oh, and Your Name. Mike, do you want to watch Your Name? Do you?
Okay, if you insist.
I mean, until you brought it up, it wasn't even on my radar. I don't even know if I'd heard of it. So
I'd seen it pop up on You Might Like This on Amazon. So I was at least, aware that it was a thing, but nothing about the blurb on Amazon made me think, yeah, I got to watch this, because the movie is difficult to describe.
Yeah. try and watch the trailer to this film, and you just really want to pass. And
I did that because I rented it through Prime. So I'll watch the trailer, see what this is about.
Oops.
And I watched the trailer, and I'm like, I might have to talk to Mike. Why are we watching this? And I trust you enough that you've gushed about this for so long. I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'll be honest. Like I said earlier, I watched it for the first time last night, and I'm still going, wow. Just wow.
You need to watch it a second time.
Oh, that's definitely happening.
Yeah.
I'm still pulling things out after my 12th viewing. And I saw this when it came out in theaters in the Boston area, right about the time that we were recording episode 1 of Geek at Arms. And you may have heard of it, James. But anyway, moving on from that. One of the problems with this film is it just defies conventional explanation. I think in some respects it is similar to films like The Princess Bride, because you ask the marketing department of The Princess Bride, come up with a tagline for this film, and they all kind of go, no. Because what is it? Are you watching a romance? Are you watching a comedy? Are you watching an adventure film? It isn't summed up in one little tagline. And I think Your Name suffers from the same problem, is that it's very complex in what it is. On one level, it's a romance film. And who doesn't like a slice of life romance film where there's Freaky Friday stuff going on, as well as, what was that time travel across frequency? I think that Brian had mentioned earlier. Yeah. With frequency elements and... gosh, what other films is this comparable to in a blender?
Now I'm on the spot and I can't think of the ones that I was thinking of before.
Because the film is just that straightforward.
Right. And even if you were to make those comparisons, I mean, you don't really want to say frequency, because then you rob the viewer of that discovery in the middle of the film, that, the tilt that turns everything on its head. You don't want to tell them that.
Right.
Which we should probably at some point have said, hey, we're not going to be able to avoid spoilers on this film. If you haven't seen it, stop listening and go watch the movie first, because it's worth it.
Absolutely.
And it's worth not having it spoiled by us.
Absolutely.
And I regret not seeing this in the theater, because the visuals are just so awe-inspiring. And it really, really needs that big screen for you to just be captivated by it, even though just watching it on my little, I don't know however big my screen is, it's beautiful, and you could just sit there and watch it, just watch the landscape and the scenery go by and just fall in love with that itself. So I really am regretful that I didn't watch it in the big screen, and if it ever comes back to the big screen, I'm definitely there to view it.
Bex, I am with you. Also, I would have loved to have seen it in a large theater with a modern sound system for the soundtrack.
Yes.
The music of this movie impressed me in so many scenes. I looked at my wife and said, I think I'm going to be buying the soundtrack.
Yeah. And it's funny because the opening song, it felt very much like an anime show. So that kind of threw me when I started watching. I'm like, wait a second. And I've seen a couple other Shinkai films, and this was completely different than my previous experiences. So it, like you were going back to saying how it's hard to describe what this movie is about. I was taken aback by the opening song. Like, what is going on? Am I watching a show? This is so anime.
I had that feeling. I felt like during the credits, is the main character going to be like walking across the shore of a river while all the other characters ride or walk or run past them at intervals while a much slower song plays?
You're not wrong, but because actually the opening of the show is showing you something from near the climax.
Yes.
So it is really a jarring and discombobulating experience when you're watching it only for the 5th time. So you're like, okay, should I be watching her hair? Should I be watching his wrist? Yes, do both of those.
Right.
And you bring up that opening opening sequence, that first shot of the movie where we're watching the comet descend. And that was the first thing that fooled me into thinking this was something else, because I still have Howl's Moving Castle in my head.
Oh.
And when I see a falling star heading toward Earth, it triggered something that that was not what this movie was. And that fooled me for a little while. But it was funny because that is the central event of the entire thing. But by the time you get to where it's going to be important, you've forgotten about it.
Right.
Even though it's the opening image of the movie, the most important thing that's going to establish this is what it's about.
Well, it's funny because the main character, Taki, has also forgotten entirely about the comet. And because he sees a message saying like, well, by the time your date finishes, the comet should be in full view. And he's looking at the sky. Like, what is she talking about?
Yep.
So for our listeners who haven't seen this film, should we stop and say this is what the film is about? But I don't know that we can.
Honestly,
summary.
Yeah. I almost just want to say, go watch the movie and then come back to the episode, because there's, like you say, what do you talk about? You got to talk about everything.
There's so much is packed into an hour and 45 minutes, but there's also not a lot wasted. I don't really know if there's any wasted scenes in this movie. For what it is, so much is packed together, and it's very tight.
Oh, yeah. So if we're not going to tell them what this film is about, because we don't have, 2.5 hours to tell them about what this hour and 45-minute movie was about, let's jump into the filmmaking. And is there anything significant in the filmmaking of this movie? And the answer to that is yes. So what is it?
All of it.
Well, the thing that jumped out to me was the use of light. We've talked in the past about the way Miyazaki's films are full of wind and the way he uses that. And this one does the same thing with the light. I mean, this is an animated movie, hand drawn. There's no lenses here, but there's lens flares everywhere. Well, they're probably not hand drawn. They're computer generated lens flares, but they have to be, deliberately added. They're not an artifact of the shooting, because there wasn't shooting.
But they're they feel natural, not like, was it J.J. Abrams?
Yes, not J.J. Abrams Star Trek lens flares.
Yeah, exactly. They feel very natural to the setting and the scenery.
They're always motivated, and there's just there's warning lamps on cranes. You've got sunlight, you've got artificial light and firelight, and all of it is
dust that shows up and refracts the sunlight differently as it passes through. It's amazing.
I think my favorite time of day is during sunset. I love sunsets, and this movie had a number of them. And I think it's the first time I've seen an animated movie actually do a sunset justice. There were a couple of where the camera focuses on them, but they're more in the background. They were so visual appealing, and they looked so right. They looked so real.
Yeah.
I was amazed by the detail and the color and the attention that was spent on them.
Like, I wish we would have said this before when we were setting up, when James was like, oh, I love the look of sunsets in the twilight hour. Like, well, James, I've got some very good news about one of the central themes of your name.
Oh, that actually reminds me of something. I don't even remember where I read it. I was looking up something else, but that whole thing about magic hour, especially when the teacher is talking about it and she writes up on the board, the twilight and
Ghost hour?
Ghost hour, yeah.
Well, did you connect the literal translation to the name of the movie?
I saw the literal translation. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what it said in the subtitles versus what was written on the screen versus what was said on the English track, because I have a lot of this thing kind of jumbled up.
Well, there's a little bit of a play on words where that word that they've translated twilight sounds just like the phrase, "Who are you?"
Oh, that I did not catch.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God. And then I had to stop and watch that carefully the next time. And because that's exactly she's looking at her notebook. And at that point, and it says, "Who are you?" on the page, and at the same time, the teacher is writing this phrase that sounds like the same phrase.
That's fascinating.
And that's something that you'll miss if you're watching the English dub, because that doesn't translate well into the English. So it's definitely there for the subtitles if you're watching it subbed. So I recommend watching both.
I watched the dubbed last night,
Which is fantastic. I love the dub.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the best voice dub I've ever seen.
Yeah. But back to we were talking about the filmmaking. The show is just gorgeous all around. Every scene, every detail, all the door opening scenes, everything was great.
I loved that so much, whether it was the bedroom door, a classroom door, a subway door.
Yeah, yeah.
What a unique and beautiful transition.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the sky and the landscape, I could literally just have that on my TV with the music playing. In fact, I need somebody to make a video that has a compilation of all of Shinkai's skies and landscapes from all of his movies, and just put some music to it, some soft music. It could be the soundtrack, it could be anything, and I'll totally just chill to that.
It's going to get like 3 million hits on YouTube.
Yeah, it really needs to happen.
Look out, lo-fi hip hop. This is taking over.
Yes.
I love to see when an animation studio has the talent and also the money to really flex their muscles and give us something that's so visually impressive. And not just a large scale, because I mean, it's no secret that animation studios will spend more money on one scene over another.
Sure.
But this one gave us so much in just the minute details, whether it's a city street, a building, a cafe, even towards the end of the movie, a broadcasting room. So much of this could have just been blurred over in any other movie. But this one, the level of detail and attention was breathtaking. And it was just a joy to watch.
Mm-hmm.
There was one scene that jumped out at me. Actually, it's just a simple shot, just a few seconds, of one of the Tokyo streets. Rain is falling. There's a puddle on the ground, and the light from a nearby storefront or a sign was reflecting in the water. And as the raindrops were hitting it, it was making the light dance. And I'm like, that doesn't need to be there. But you took the time to animate just those few seconds to establish the shot of where and when we are and to create a mood. And yeah, you didn't have to, but you did. And I love it.
Yeah.
Because you said that, I'm going to bring up what my wife's favorite visual component was when I asked her. And she said it was the rain hitting the street and the rain hitting the cobblestones in the country.
Oh, yeah.
It was so beautiful. She said it was Miyazaki level of detail and beauty. And honestly, that's kind of the standard I hold anime movies to, which I'm sure I'm not alone in that. There were aspects of this movie I think went above and beyond.
Yeah, I love Hayao Miyazaki's work. I mean, I love it enough that I asked us if we could bring on an anime specialist to be a guest on our show when we were talking about it. And in my opinion, this is prettier than any of the works that I've seen come out of Miyazaki, whom I love dearly.
I love the fact that we have both Miyazaki and Shinkai.
Yup.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, there isn't just the one artist. There's two now. And that just shows me that Miyazaki had an impact on Shinkai. No doubt, right?
Yeah.
So that just shows me that there is going to be another artist who is impacted by Miyazaki or Shinkai or both. And we're going to have more movies and experiences like this. So that's what thrills me, is that we have two now.
Yes. There was a scene where Mitsuha was looking in the mirror and she was doing her hair up, but she started to cry. And her tears were completely, it looked like they were copy and pasted out of My Neighbor Totoro. They were. I had to pause it, rewind, and watch them again because they were such the Miyazaki style of tears. And I'm like, did he do that on purpose? Is that a stylistic choice?
I think it was. because there was another spot where I noticed a similar thing. The jerk in the restaurant, something about the line work, the shape of his face
Oh yeah.
made him look like a Miyazaki villain.
Yeah.
You're right.
The instant he appeared on the screen, I knew he was a bad guy because I think it was a very deliberate homage.
With the weird haircut and the clothes.
And that the kind of lumpy profile.
Yeah.
He's probably going to be a villain in one of Shinkai's future works because all of these things connect to each other. Mitsuha shows up in Weathering with You. There are references to his works all over each other, and they happen in the same world. Like, yeah, I mean, like, doesn't this happen in Japan? Well, yes, but also no. But definitely yes.
Yeah, there was something else I stumbled across that the name of the restaurant Taki works at is the title of one of Shinkai's previous films.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
And I didn't look it up to verify that. It's just something that I stumbled over in Reddit when I was looking for something else.
Interesting.
One thing that I thought was just absolutely breathtaking was not only the stylistic shift in the animation, but also just this bizarrely immersive experience when we do our time travel sequence. Like when he drinks the sake and he follows the thread going back through Mitsuha's life. It's just absolutely incredible.
I loved that scene.
I looked at that and thought, so that's what it would look like if you gave a Renaissance master artist a big box of crayons.
Huh.
I mean, in some ways, yeah. I mean, I don't really quite know how to describe the stylistic shift. Part of it looks like it's been done either in chalk or pastels, and then it suddenly isn't. And the thread going through her life and the comet and a stream of water all being interconnected and paralleled, even showing us Mitsuha's birth. I'm like, no, not her birth, but when one cell divides to two and then
the conception,
yeah, and then you see her birth. It's just amazing.
Speaking of some of his older works, he likes to tell stories that hit on themes of loss, long journeys over time and space, and connections despite distance. And that was a good representation of that, because at that point, you know the twist, right? That they're separated by 3 years of time. Mitsuha died at the impact, and he's trying to reconnect with her through drinking the sake. And that scene just kind of encapsulated all of his deep connection with her using the visuals of that string, which was really cool.
Well, was there anything else we wanted to say about the filmmaking aspect?
I did want to talk about the editing a little bit. The hallmark of a good edit is that you don't see it. It's just there's a different image on screen. You don't notice that we've changed shots. And this is most of it. This film was filled with those. You don't notice the edits, but there were also some that were really clever and stylish. My favorite one was in the restaurant where there's a shot of the food, taking a picture of the food, and when the camera cell phone drops out of the image, the meal's already been eaten. Empty plate.
It's been devoured.
I love that bit every time.
It's such terrific storytelling and really fast and simple shot.
And can we talk about why the food in this movie looks so much better than real food? All of it looks so delicious. Even the ramen. Forget real food, whatever's in the kitchen. I want to eat that.
Give me some cartoon ramen.
That is the question of the ages. I don't think we'll ever have an answer to that.
Even slicing the tomato, which is the first food product we see in the movie, like, oh, that's a good looking tomato.
I mean,
if they made a movie that was just an hour and a half of an anime kitchen and it looked like that, it would break so many box office awards.
So basically what you're saying is I want a lo-fi video of scenery, like landscapes and sky. You want a lo-fi video of anime food. Okay, we got that.
Yeah.
Then I have an anime that is not for you. It's called Food Wars.
Oh no.
Yeah, I've read the premise of that show. I'm like, I'm going to stay away from that.
Pass. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we didn't know. Okay, here's the story. We didn't know what it was. We,
Oh, no.
honest to goodness, did not know what it was. And
Oh, no.
what it was is that my youngest she loves anime, and my wife was like, okay, let's find one to watch together. Oh, Food Wars. Oh, we love cooking. This'll be great.
Oh,
Presses
dear.
play. We
Fun
get
for the whole family.
we get right there with the peanut butter and squid, and there goes the tentacle, and then
Oh.
they both tap out like, I'm uncomfortable. Can we turn this off? Like, yes, we can.
I saw a
Yes.
clip on YouTube where we go from cooking to a scene like that. And at first I'm like, okay, this is really nice. I may have to, what, how, why is this happening? Why does this exist?
Oh, because anime.
Okay. So
Anime.
moving on to a different visual experience.
Yes.
Before we talk about the storytelling and the structure, I just want to ask, on your first viewing, what was it like sitting down and experiencing this film?
You had told us months ago that you think you're watching one kind of movie and it turns into something else, and then it turns into something else. And I had that in my head. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and anticipate and ride this roller coaster and figure out where it's going. And I was feeling pretty good about it. I'd got a few things right, feeling proud of myself. I called the time travel bit ahead of time, but then the tilt came along about exactly the comet event, and that just turned everything over, upset my expectations. And from there, I didn't know. Okay, well, I thought I knew what was happening, and now I really don't. And I loved that. I was piecing things together, I think, at the rate that the movie wanted me to.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying, okay, well, why don't they just call each other? And then the very next scene is he's trying to call her. Like, I'd have done that months ago, honestly.
Right.
And I hate telephones.
I can remember thinking, like you, Brian, as it progressed, I was enjoying where the story was going. I kind of had an idea that there was going to be body switching going on from the trailer. And at one point I wondered, I wonder if it's not just space that is being switched. I wonder if there are different time periods as well. I thought, well, no, they both have cell phones. And the first thing that you see when you open your cell phone is the time and date.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's, of course, it's at the same time period. And when it was discovered that they are at different time periods, I was like, how could they not have, what? No. How do they not know? They're in school. They literally know that the day of the, okay, James, stop analyzing it.
No, because they do mess up there. Like, not the filmmakers.
I know it's not a small plot hole. It's kind of a Toho Godzilla-sized plot hole. But I'm like, you know what? If I focus on this too much, I'm not going to enjoy the rest of the movie.
But they showed you that they were looking at different days. They're looking at the same dates, but they showed you on their cell phones that the days were different. And there was one day that Taki in Mitsuha's body comes down the stairs dressed for school, and they ask her, why are you dressed for school?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so they're showing you that it's not right.
Mhm.
But you don't think
But
to
it's
ask.
subtle
They didn't
enough.
think to ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's subtle. Like, I mean, if this was actually happening, because, body switching and time travel happens to me all the time.
That does explain a few things.
And of course, they're waking up and trying to figure out whether or not whether they're a young man or a young lady. I mean, it seems like there's some sort of Swiss cheese effect in keeping their brain straight as they're making this switch, but nothing not so jarring or discombobulated as Beckett did in his switches.
So going back to your question, I knew that I was going to have a visual feast for the eyes. I also knew that it was a romance and that there was going to be body switching. There was a few instances where I was a little on the cringe side, like, oh no, what am I getting into? What is
Yep.
this?
Yeah, that was
And we'll
serious
get into that. We'll get into that. But I had steeled myself against heartbreak because I've seen some past Shinkai, and there's the ones I've seen, there's never been a happy ending. So I was expecting this to go sour, to not have a good ending. They wouldn't be together. So I did not cry. Because I was ready for it.
Or made a sterner stuff than me.
I was right there with you. I'm like, okay, if they pull off this thing, if they decide that, oh, she survives, but then we find out like
they never meet.
They never meet, or that he discovers that she dies in like a car accident, or something medical. If they do that to me, I'm throwing the remote through the TV.
I was going to be very angry as well. Yes. So pleasantly surprised. Very, very pleased with the ending. And yeah, so that just put a smile on my face that that actually had a happy ending, and they found each other, and they ended with saying, "What's your name?"
Yeah. One thing that I really appreciated was, for a movie that deals so much with how we're connected through the universe and with the future and the past being connected, I like the fact that they didn't show us anything of the future.
Yes. We get to write that in our imaginations.
They to each other say, "Can I please ask, what's your name?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because we show the future's uncertain, but you know what? We can also believe that time and space was broken apart, and these two were connected together through all of it. They finally found each other through it all. So you know what? Let's believe that from this point on, they get to have that happily ever after.
Yes.
They get to have that happy ending together,
yes,
of rediscovering each other.
Yeah.
And that love that was shared. I was expecting to, like what happens with many animes, that we'll get scenes of I was expecting a Miyazaki type credit scene where we see moments of the future drawn in among the credits. And at first I was disappointed that I wasn't getting that, but then I was very happy. We don't need to see to believe that these two are going to be happy in the future.
The fact that they were able to do something so evocative with your imagination of how they discover each other is powerful enough. It's just taking you on this emotional journey of trying to bring two people together, that it just plain didn't need it, and anything they did would rob you of the ability to have headcanon.
Speaking of robbing of the ability to have headcanon, and also the fact that they didn't give us a broken, unhappy ending, this may be just my unfamiliarity with a large amount of anime, but it didn't feel like that this movie had what people would call typical anime tropes in it. Or am I wrong?
What is a typical anime trope? I mean, do you mean like your main character becoming an amoeba after he opens up the Akira thing and
Okay, so we'll get to it a little bit later about the only real cringy part of the anime. Like when that happens, or when the guy sees a girl, there's no nosebleed.
Okay, yeah.
And there's no people falling over themselves. It's a much more mature type of film.
Those things are often in the comedy genres.
Sure.
Rather than this is more a drama.
Well, it has enough of the storytelling tropes that leaves us satisfied. So it's a romance. You know, they kind of dislike each other at first because they're ruining each other's lives. But then at some point they fall in love with each other. So there's enough storytelling tropes that make us love it. But you're right. There wasn't a lot of just over the top anime tropes. And that I do appreciate, because sometimes those just get tiring.
But there are still hints of some of those things.
Yes.
I'm thinking specifically of the lunch sharing bit. the first time we see Mitsuha in Taki's body, and was it Tsukasa? Tsukasa and the other guy share little bits of their lunch with her. Yep. And at the end of it, Tsukasa's like, I kind of thought he was cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's evoking that trope, but it wasn't, put that right out there in your face.
Right. And also when when they're face to face with each other and she finds out that he drank the sake and she calls him a pervert, that's a little bit of a trope too, a little bit. But
I was wondering if there was some cultural context that I wasn't getting. Is it because he drank something was in his mouth that used to be in her mouth?
If you were dating a girl and she said, I drank a glass of your spit, I don't know.
I mean, it is kind of gross. It's regurgitated rice.
I don't know, the way this movie was going, I halfway expected her to go, aw, ew, aw.
Trying to imagine what that felt like for her, because it already was an embarrassing and personal part of her practice when she was doing this at the shrine. Mm-hmm. And then the idea, like, wait, you drank this thing that's half of me? What?
Mm-hmm.
Has to be a violating experience. Not only was it embarrassing that people saw it, now someone's drinking it.
Right. And she had expected it to stay in that cave forever.
There you go. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Can I talk about the Shinto scene just for a moment?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
One of the things that really impressed me about this movie was the quiet moments. This movie showed that you don't need the big scenes, the dramatic scenes, to really do some beautiful storytelling. There can be power in quiet moments. That was something that Miyazaki showed us time and time again. And two that stood out to me in this movie were the scene where Mitsuha is practicing. At first is practicing, but then is later performing the Shinto ritual. Mm-hmm. With who I thought was her mother, but then she doesn't appear again, and you find out later that her mother had passed away. And the other scene was the embroidery scene, where her grandmother is at a large embroidery machine. She is sitting in front of a kumihimo set, and her sister is trying to do something similar, but is complaining, which is appropriate. And the only reason I know what that is because years ago I bought my wife a kumihimo disc, so she could do embroidery in the same way. And with just the disc, it's difficult to do because keeping a constant tension on the cord is essential. And besides how much I enjoyed the scene, I had to pause it because I was looking at the kumihimo setup, at how it was built. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna need a couple.
Can I do this?
I'm gonna need a couple of pieces of either poplar or oak, 4 dowel rods. Yeah, I can make that. And I'm like, would you like one of those? And she's like, I think I might. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll start drawing up plans. You know what? If a movie wants to make me build something that was in it, well done to that movie.
Yeah, no kidding.
Woodworking projects aside, the Shinto scene was beautiful. The animation was so fluid.
Yeah.
It looked more like a motion capture scene instead of one that was drawn. It brought to mind and I know nothing about the Shinto religion, and I don't know if it's essential to Shinto or just the Japanese culture as a whole, but the remembrance of ancestors is vital to them. That also made me think that if we had not had this scene, then the movie might as well have been over.
Right.
But it got me thinking about one time that I was, years ago when I was living in San Antonio, a coworker's husband passed away. And all of us in this department went to his funeral. It was at a very large, well-known Catholic church in the city. And I witnessed the power of ceremony, of ritual. I don't know a lot about what normally goes on in Catholic church, but the interaction between him and the congregation, the back and forth of the ritual words, and so much more, I understood it. I understood the power of the union of the people being in it and being a part of something bigger than themselves, and the unity and the closeness as a body, as a whole. And it's easy to realize why the Catholic Church endured so many hundreds of years throughout the medieval period and why it grew and made me think of comparisons between that and the Shinto ceremony I saw. We get two different viewpoints in the movie. We get the grandma who believes in keeping these rituals alive. This is our history. And we have Mitsuha's father, who does not care about it at all, who looks at it as hokey, superstition almost, and wants no part of it. And when they're performing this ceremony, you see not a lot of people are outside witnessing it. There's even a few, like, not hecklers, but people just joking around as they watch their classmate, Mitsuha, do the rice spitting scene. But it was so well done that it's easy to see the appeal of it and how it can be so important in people's lives.
It's interesting because I know a little bit about Shinto, and the interesting thing is that it is largely ritual. Like, they don't have a holy book. They don't have a spiritual tenet for moral guidance. It is about observance and thankfulness and reverence for fill in the blank. And when the grandmother was explaining the scene was in a scene explaining, well, we don't have any records from the shrine, that all burned down, but we have the practice. We don't know why we're doing the practice, but we know that it is important to keep this practice. Kaja, who's more studied in Shinto than I am, part of her thesis in Japanese Christianity. And I looked at her and I'm like, legit? She's like, legit. And I'm like, okay, at least that rang true. Also, what little I know about Shinto, the father's reaction is not terribly surprising, because a Shinto priest is going to have a different regard for the religion than say a Catholic priest, because this gets super complicated super fast. But I'll just say this: if you look at the religious demographic of Japan, and you add up what percentage is Buddhist, what percentage is Shinto, what percentage is Confucian. Thank you. I don't know why I'm stumbling over that word, Confucian. You come up with more than 100%, because they're not mutually exclusive. They say everyone is born Shinto and dies Buddhist, because those are the religious practices and adherents that govern those sections of their lives. There is a lot of civic observance in Shinto, without it necessarily being what would strike a Christian as religious devotion. Am I making any sense?
You are to me.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I'm not an authority on Shinto, so but at least what little bit I knew, it seemed grounding in the film to have it for the narrative purposes that it served.
Well, it goes along with the theme of connection, right? Because you mentioned how they're connected with their ancestors through these rituals. They don't really know why they're doing it, but they've been doing it for so long that this is just what we do. This is actually a really good point, because I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but I'm actually glad that it kind of got brought up. But, as Christians, we have the liturgy, right? The liturgy is the work of the people. And in our modern churches, there's not a lot of liturgy for the people. There's not. Mm-hmm. You show up, you maybe sing some songs depending on the type of church, or you might just watch the performance of the worship team up front. And again, depending on the church, you may or may not partake of the Lord's Supper. But one thing that really has, me and my husband have gone back and forth on this a bit. We don't sing the Psalms. And the Psalms are the songs of the first century church. And what a connection we have to those first century Christians to sing the Psalms. Why we should be singing the Psalms. And that's a great connecting point to those early Christians. And then the Lord's Supper itself is a connection point to the very first Lord's Supper and the disciples and Jesus making the new covenant right then and there. So it's kind of a little heartbreaking to me because modern day Christians don't feel that connection. And so I can see why they would just drift off and not go to church anymore, because they don't know why they're doing the things they're doing. And you had mentioned how the Catholic Church has endured through the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. And well, that's because they had those rituals. They had those rituals to connect the people to their faith, to their ancestors, to the earlier Christians. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just rambling at this point, but
No. There's a power to them, and doing them together with the people of your community and in unison with the priesthood, it brings about a sense of purpose, a sense of I am connected to the people around me, and I am connected to something larger than myself.
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
And this is something that we, Kaja and I, try to do in the churches where we have the privilege of serving, and that is we like high church. We will put more liturgy and more ritual if we can. And one of the things that's a real privilege is to try to educate, not just make it a form, but make it a form with purpose. In the film, there seemed to be a purpose imbued with the form, that it seemed like the gravity of the practice carried along with it, at least for the people involved. The people who are outside spectators, not so much. But when we're functioning as clergy, we try to say, this is why we do this. This is how we engage each other, and this is why, as we engage in the Eucharist, we're not just connecting to us as a body of Christ. We're connecting us with Christ. We in Christ meet each other, and we meet all Christians around the world and all Christians who have come before us, who have taken part of his body and this cup, and try to ground this is who we are as God's covenant people. And we tend to find the ritual and the liturgy very meaningful because we've studied it, and we pass the meaning on so that other people can find the gravity there as well.
What movie were we talking about again?
Weathering with You.
Let's do that one next.
Okay.
That's tomorrow.
Well, with all of that in our minds right now, this is not something I'd thought about before, but what do you suppose happened with the Miyamizu shrine after the comet fell?
Oh. Wait, in which timeline?
The final one that we wind up with. We see Mitsuha living apparently by herself in Tokyo. Her sister's going to school. I don't recall that we saw her grandmother afterwards.
Mitsuha's sister remained on as a shrine maiden in the interim, and they found someone else to become the priest, who continued on the shrine, and for future generations to have future priests and more shrine maidens. The end.
Okay. You don't think Mayor Miyamizu had a change of heart and returned
forever
to the priesthood?
and ever.
Amen. Nope. He slinked away into the shadows after the disgrace of whatever his ulterior motives were in saving the town, when he couldn't possibly have known that he was saving the town.
That was both optimistic and terribly cynical at the same time. Right?
Yes.
Have you met me?
I have.
I do want to point out that there was a scene that I was expecting, and I was expecting it with a severe sense of foreboding, because once we established that the body switching was happening more and more often, we had seen Mitsuha practicing and then performing a Shinto ritual. I was awaiting the scene where it would be the day, an important ritual, and Taki's in the body.
I'm surprised that wasn't there. Honestly, I was expecting it too.
I'm like, oh, please, no, for everyone's sake, don't put that scene on there. And I thought the day of the festival happened, I thought that's when it was going to happen. And it didn't. And instead, thankfully, all that happened was a comet hitting the town. So thank goodness for that.
Whew, that was a close one.
If this was Freaky Friday, that would have happened. And also, she would have been in his body during a major basketball game when she just does not care about basketball. Yeah.
And that's the difference between a comedy and a drama.
Right.
Yep. Although they did a good job with giving you some comedic elements for when they were in each other's bodies.
Gosh. Yes.
It was small enough and then big enough at the same time. I loved how they were riding on each other's arms and on the face. And
that was the most beautiful thing ever. Like,
yes.
Like just after, like, you gotta watch this skirt. No, you can't do that. Quit messing with my life. And then just like the relationship tension there, and it just went next level when they were idiot on their face and permanent marker.
You have too many shifts.
It's because you're spending all my money.
My money, yes.
Going in your body. I work for it too.
Stop going to the cafe. I love that that's all she did was just go to the cafe. She's in his body and she's getting increasingly girlier looking food.
Yep. It was great. And I just wanted to add that I was okay with how the time traveling worked. Like, I didn't need to know the ins and outs and the hows and the whys and the whens. It was, the perfect description of it is wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, and that's good enough.
I think I would have ruined it if we knew too much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I assumed, and then was proven right, that it had something to do with the comet, because it began... The last time the comet came around hundreds of years before, and that's when the body switching apparently began in her family line. And it was something that went down through the women of the family. And I'm like, okay, cool. Comet related.
That's it.
Great. Accepted.
That's all we needed.
Move on.
Yep.
And I also love the fact that the grandmother recognized that something was going on.
Yeah.
And she would just say, Mitsuha, you're dreaming. And then they got to have the conversation. Like, there's a comet that's going to destroy the town. We got to save them. And the grandmother just said, accepts this narrative. Like, but no one will believe you. It is like, how typical. Like,
good luck.
Like, yeah, I believe you, but no one else will. Great. And...
Where are we?
Wow, we are definitely having a Geek at Arms day, aren't we? I think we're at it doesn't follow any of the Hollywood formulas.
So halfway through this episode.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, so I guess that's a question. Is there anything here that we need to skip for time's sake?
We can skip mine where I ask what was the moment they each fell in love.
No, we can't skip that because that was my favorite question in this whole outline.
Oh.
Because I don't know the answer. I don't know that we see that moment. But I think the moment that we're meant to realize that they're in love is when they're the date with Okudera is starting, and Mitsuha is crying, and she doesn't know why.
Yeah.
And then Okudera says, "Taki, you're in love with somebody," and he doesn't know. He's never met her. How could he be in love with her?
I was worried about that date because if they hit it off, if they become an item. The writing on this show sucks.
Well, it's funny because Mitsuha's really rooting for him. Like, she is setting him up to succeed. And she even said, I wanted to go on this date.
Yeah. And she includes like all of the links on his phone, 100 conversation starters through text, and so many more. And he takes it she's mocking me. No, she's not. You're being too much of a guy right now. She actually is trying to help you, dude.
And it's funny, like, who did she want to go on that date with is the question. And I don't have time to unpack that. But it's after the date that they both want to talk to each other.
Yes.
So after she's like, I set him up with this date, she tries to go out and see him, but she can't find him. Like, he should be right here. but he's not. And after the date, he tries to call her, and he's not getting a cell phone. I think that's when we get a real sense of where this film is going, and that's developing a sense of longing in these characters. Because I think that romance in film requires a sense of chemistry and longing. We have to want them to be together, and they have to want to be together. And romances are about people not being able to be together while the audience is rooting for them. So I don't know that we know the moment that they fell in love, but I know that the date was the moment where we wanted them to be in love.
As a related question, when do you think Okudera and Tsukasa fell in love?
Are those Mitsuha's friends?
Those are Taki's friends.
Taki's friends. Oh.
I didn't really see Tsukasa as a character that I really cared about. To me, he was the most side character of all the side characters. Like, he was there, he served a purpose to help Taki on his journey, but then that was it. I didn't really care about him.
Memorable only because he's the one character wearing glasses.
Yes, yes.
No, but there is this thing about they're off on a quest. They're off on a journey. We're going to help him find his mystery girl. And I could see that being the seeds of a relationship where they have this unified moment.
You also see them in the background of all these places that they're searching. He's reading, he's talking to people. They're taking pictures with mascots. They're going upstairs and exploring.
They're playing a game. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a man on a mission. They're there to support him, but they're also having a bit of fun as well. And what's important is that every scene you see them, they're joking and they're laughing. They're enjoying each other's company.
And that was actually one of my favorite bits of the movie was watching that relationship because it's very backgrounded.
Yeah.
I mean, is that when they fell in love? No, but we're seeing the building blocks of it.
See, it's funny. I've seen the film like, I don't know how many times. And I noticed at the end of the film, she was married. I didn't realize that's who she was married to.
Yeah,
he's got a ring on too. I rewound and I watched that to check on him. And he's also wearing a ring in that last cafe scene.
Oh, there's so many layers and layers to this movie.
Oh, yes.
So I guess I have to watch it again.
Yes.
Such a chore. I know, right?
One thing that I just do want to loop onto the storytelling is that usually in a 3-act story, we have this experience where we introduce Act 1, we introduce the characters. Act 2, we put them in a hole. Act 3, we pull them out of a hole. And I don't know that this story so much did that as it did that to the viewers. Because it gave us the ability to say, okay, what kind of film am I watching? Okay, I'm watching a Freaky Friday romance. Like, they're going to get to know each other, and that's living through each other's experiences is how they're going to get to know each other and come to love each other. Then they're going to meet. And then they put you in a hole because she's dead. Which he finds her name on a list of people killed in this tragedy. And so as an audience, you're in a hole. Like, you were looking for her, and now she is lost. And you don't even know if did he really talk to her? Is she a ghost? Is it time travel? Is it madness? How is this possible? And then in Act 3, they give you the grounding to say, okay, we know that she was real. And we know that this connection was real. Now, how are they going to solve the problem of she and everybody else are dead?
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Very wibbly wobbly. Very timey wimey. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey sake. That's what they should have called it.
Yes. So I guess I'll get to my tragic makers then.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Although,
just kidding. Go ahead. Tragic.
I do want to make one quick point on the wibbly wobbly timey wimey sake. He made a trip to a shrine that is built in the center of a meteor impact from thousands of years ago that is inside a sealed, moss-covered container. What did he think was going to happen when he drank it?
the trip of his life.
Which he got, and we got to go right along with him. So sorry, please continue.
So when I first watched it and she cut her hair, I was annoyed. My first viewing, I was kind of annoyed at a few things. And this was one of them, because that was one of the tropes that I don't like in anime. I don't like in shows. Why does the girl have to cut her hair? Okay, yeah, it's a visual for her overcoming some tragedy or past thing or whatever, but I don't like it. So when it happened, I was ready to just not like this movie. And then thinking that they weren't going to get together in the end, I was setting myself up for a lot of hate for this film.
That doesn't happen until almost the end.
Yes, I know. But the second time I watched it, I got a better understanding of the events and when they were taking place. And then I got why she cut, I mean, maybe not why she cut her hair, but the initial reason for it, which was she went to go see Taki. And she saw him 3 years in the past as a much younger Taki. So he's only about 13 or 14, and she's 17 at that time. And she gives him the ribbon that she had always tied her hair up with. And that was the band that he had on his wrist. So her coming back to her little village, she asked her grandmother, could you cut my hair?
Because it's always in my face. I don't have my ribbon anymore.
Don't have my ribbon anymore. But I guess that was her realization that he was 3 years in the past and we might not ever be able to be together again. I don't know. Maybe that's what the reason was for her cutting her hair, but I kind of got it the second time around and I was a little bit more okay with it. But what do you guys think about the hair cutting? Like, what do you think her reason for cutting her hair was?
Oh, gosh.
I think it was mourning.
You do realize you're on a podcast with three dudes, right?
Well, yeah, but
I'm kidding.
You watch enough movies to know that that's a trope.
Yeah.
I've watched enough relationships to know that that's a trope. No, I've actually seen people use the trope in real life. Yeah.
Yeah.
After my wife left, I grew my hair out, not as long as it is now, which you can't see, but it's fairly long now. But I grew it out for a while, and then when I felt it was time, it's like, okay, this relationship is gone, and it's time to stop mourning. I shaved it off. So yeah, I have utilized that trope, to help my own healing from a relationship.
Honestly, I'm surprised that we didn't get the scene earlier in the movie after the switches happened, because I could have seen her getting it cut short. So
that Taki would stop messing with it.
Yeah. Well, so it's more manageable for him to deal with, or I could picture him being the one getting it cut
in
her body to make it more manageable. And then when she wakes up, she feels her. What did you do?
That's a relationship ender. Yeah. There is something very personal in cutting that strand. And I know that hair has lots of strands, but I mean, it's thematically appropriate in this film. The sound effect is almost the same when they're cutting her umbilical cord and they're cutting her hair.
Yeah.
I think they also use that sound effect when the connection is lost between them.
Oh, interesting.
At this scene where she's watching the comet and we see a part break off and start to come down, before the screen switches to black, you hear a discordant noise. I might be wrong, but I think that's also the same sound we hear, symbolizing the cutting of a different cord, the cord between them.
I mean, I think that is in one sense what's happening, because she started to like a guy, and she is not an assertive person. She steeled her courage to go all the way into Tokyo to find him. And when she did, he didn't even know who she was. And I don't know what she realized or didn't realize at that point. But at that point, that is an ultimate rejection of not even knowing who you are. And there's something very personal about your hair. It is a part of you. and yet it is something that you can sever. And so people do use it as an outward show of mourning. People use it as an outward show of control, sometimes in an attempt to gain control of a part of you when everything else seems to be coming apart. I think that this is a participation in those activities, but I don't know.
And I like that it's ambiguous enough that we can read our own experience into it.
Yeah.
It also goes across culture.
Mm-hmm.
So Bex, why do you think she cut her hair?
I think all what you said, I can agree with that. When watching it my second time around, I picked up on a lot more clues to the timelines happening. So I paid a little bit more attention to how she wore her hair when she was Mitsuha and how he wore her hair when he was Mitsuha. So there was definitely a finalizing thing that happened when she cut her hair. Because I think they only body swapped once after that. And that was the final day. But it was an interesting clue given to the viewer that the timelines are crisscrossing. So I'm accepting of all your answers.
I'm just imagining her in a judge room. I'll allow it.
Yeah. I just tend to not like that trope.
Yeah.
But I can understand why it's used, but sometimes I think that it's overused. And I don't know if this is one of those instances or not. But I did like the fact that when you see older Mitsuha, she had her long hair again. So I did appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they hung a lantern on what you're saying with the trope when Teshi and Sayaka are talking about it. And he's like, oh, maybe it's about a guy. She says, you always think it's about a guy. The fact that it was about a guy is beside the point.
Right.
If we're going to talk about tragic makers, I mean, can I bring up the thing that it's cringe? I don't like talking about it, but I think we
gotta talk about it.
We gotta address it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody want to name it?
Sure, I can go for it. So that first scene when Taki wakes up in Mitsuha's body, I knew that was coming because I've heard people talk about it. But man, it was so bad. He does what any 16-year-old boy would do in that situation, which was he gropes the breasts.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say the breasts because at that point they're like he's waking up in a dream as a girl. They're my breasts. Right? That's the harm. I think it's cringier when he realizes what's going on.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay.
The first, it's more about disbelief and shock.
Right.
What in the world is going on? What is this? Every single time afterward, though, that's a different story.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she at least addressed it. I mean, granted, it was there and gone,
Yeah.
but she had to address it.
Yeah. And it's one of those scenes that you don't want your mom walking in on as you're watching this. There's no explaining it. There's no explaining it.
Or your 9-year-old.
Yes.
I mean, or watching this with your teenage children. I mean,
man.
They were in the theater when we went to go see it, and it's kind of like, okay. I mean, this was 5 years ago, so they're a bit younger. Like, okay, so I wonder if this is going to be a conversation after the film or not. I don't know.
So after seeing that, I was very worried when we were going to see the flip side,
which we did,
and all that happened was after she realized, wait, something's there, what's happening, and she's still trying to figure it out, and then she just has this really embarrassed and uncomfortable look on her face and goes, I have to pee.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you poor girl.
Yeah.
I also very much appreciate that as she's leaving the house and the bathroom, she has this just deeply embarrassed look on her face.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's her with a lot more sense of decorum over the situation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I did ask my wife her thoughts on the whole wake up, first thing we do, we yawn, we stretch, we grab our chest with him. It almost became a ritual.
Right.
And I'm like, what are your thoughts, dear? She's like, well, honestly, I found it to be one of the most realistic parts of the movie. What 15-year-old boy wouldn't be doing that?
Yeah, and I get that. I think inference is dead, and they didn't have to animate that. They
There you
didn't
go.
have to animate her standing, well, him standing in front of the mirror and panning up across her buttocks. And I think those points, that should be points taken off the movie, because I think that just doesn't need to be animated. We can infer all that stuff, just like we inferred her in Taki's body discovering things and having to deal with those things. I think they could have done a better job with that and not animate it.
At least not animated it 4 times.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
That
Yeah.
being said, I do want to give the movie 1 point on that. And do we need it? No. But I'm also very happy that that's the worst that it got.
Sure. Yep.
It could have been any other type of movie. It could have been done much more obscene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was not delicate. Yeah, I mean, we're not watching Food Wars, thank goodness. I mean,
Yes.
we're not gonna have Film Club Food Wars edition. It's just, but yeah, I mean, I do have to agree that it does seem like a realistic perspective, but there's a lot that's realistic. And I was thinking about this before coming to the recording. There's a lot that's realistic that they didn't choose to animate. Like, what is the look on Mitsuha's face while Taki is going to the bathroom? What is she doing with her eyes? Where is her glance?
Mhm.
What is, like, you didn't animate that because no one wants to watch the toilet scenes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So moving on.
Yeah, we have to do something positive really quick and not just end on grabbing breasts.
Sure.
No, I mean, I just think it's a tonally not a great place to end. We have a lot of things that we could say.
You know what? We should take a moment to talk about the main characters. So let's start off with Taki.
His main, if you talk about characters with a flaw, and that's the thing that they're having to work through the story, I think Taki's personality issue that he's got to address is his overly confrontational nature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we start and he's got a bandage on his face, and we're not ever told exactly why the bandage is on his face, but Okudera gives us the hint that he got in a fight that he already knew he couldn't win. And that causes problems, not just for him, but it causes problem in Mitsuha's life as he confronts her bullies. I don't know that he ever really solved that, though, did he?
I think that in the end, we get to see him pulling back from it because he is right there with the mayor. He knows what he needs to do. The mayor needs to make that announcement. He grabs the mayor, Mitsuha's dad, by the tie and is like, well, hey, listen up here, bub. I do not have an end game by escalating this.
Wait, where am I
he
going from here?
Yeah. Didn't he even call her dad dirtbag or something like that?
Something like that.
I said bub just because that's what I said on the Geek at Arms podcast because, we don't bleep or anything. That'd be terrible if you bleeped me saying bub. I hate you so much. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to now.
Dang it. I tell our guests we don't do bleeps. But he backs down from that. And I think that we get to see not so much a whole lot of character growth, but we do see that he at least has that moment of realization. Like, my way of dealing with problems isn't working. And it's interesting because on the flip side, when Mitsuha in Mitsuha's body is then brought in front of her father, we don't see it. I mean, it's off screen, but she says or does something that is effective in moving her father to backing up the evacuation. We know this because the evacuation isn't working. She's set in front of her father and suddenly everybody is moving out of the area. I think that we get to see character growth, not a lot of it, but a little character growth in both of them in those confrontations with the father.
Right. Well, and because what I've got the note I made on Mitsuha is that her main issue is she's so socially self-conscious. She's got this social shame that follows her around everywhere. And in order to get that done, she had to toss that off. She had to not worry about what her father was going to think about her.
I like how we are first introduced to Taki through Mitsuha being Taki for a day.
Yes.
So I thought that was a neat way to get to know a character by being that person.
And we don't even really see him in her body for more than just a couple moments. We get to see all of the reactions to what he had done the previous day.
Right, right. So the first few body switches is mainly Mitsuha being Taki, and then we start seeing a little bit more mixture of it. So Taki's character development doesn't really come from him per se, if that makes sense.
I think we get to see a little bit of character development with him, not right away. When we see him 5 years in the future, toward the end of the show, we do see that as he's going from interview to interview. And I'm just going to make the assumption that he got some type of architectural degree, because we see how much of a skilled artist he is and the drawings that he was making of Mitsuha's hometown. And he talks about wanting to build, and he wants to build places that will be remembered and will help connect people with their history. And it's very easy to see how he came to that desire with all of the research that he did for Mitsuha's hometown and all of the history that he looked into, and into the mountains and to the architecture of shrines and more. You see how he made a connection to that, how it resonated with him and formed his desire to build that for another generation.
Can we talk about the little cafe that Tsukasa made for the girls?
Oh my gosh, that is darling.
I loved it.
I didn't notice. I didn't see that the first time around. So my second viewing, I noticed that, and I'm like, oh, he made them a little cafe. How cute!
I must have missed it.
Yeah, like early in the movie, they said her friend says, let's go to a cafe, and what it is, they're sitting on a bench by a couple of vending machines. Like, you knew there wasn't one, but what he, and it is implied, Taki in Mitsuha's body helps him build a picnic table and blanket and gets an umbrella and makes the bench more into like a picnicky area into the cafe.
It's very cute. It's one of those cute moments that you appreciate the second go around.
Just going to add that to the list of things to look out for my next viewing.
It's during the montage.
Yes, it's during the montage.
That montage was so grand.
Shall we move on to Mitsuha?
I kind of talked a little bit about her character when I was going off on her haircutting ceremony that she did. but I found her somewhat relatable because you see a lot of her struggles right away. So she is definitely the more sympathetic character in the show. And I think it was very well done because she's a lovable, she's a very likable person. Character. So when you see some of those struggles, and then you realize that she died, then that's a really pathetic, or I shouldn't say pathetic, but the feelings that you get from that's when you start really being interested in Taki, because now Taki's, okay, now we have to do something about that, Taki. Okay, now you got to go and save her.
But I think it's interesting that he doesn't save her as much as they work together to save everyone. And I think that's beautiful, because that's what this film is about. Like when during the montage of living each other's lives, they're leaving each other notes and coordinating so that they can help each other be successful during the switches. And part of that is self-interest, and part of that is interest in the other, which I mean is in some way what relationships are. You have self-interest, you have other interests commingling. And in this event, it is on a grandiose scale where he comes up with a plan, but it won't be effective unless she executes. And granted, her friends are doing, the blowing up and the announcing, but things are still failing until she's standing in front of her father.
Mm.
I like how you put it in the notes. I mean, these are two people who their lives have become so intertangled that once they reach that level of cooperation, they both have agency in the town being saved. Because that was my worry. Is it just going to be the back and forth between them? You're messing up my life. Stop spending my money. Stop ordering foods. Are they ever going to reach a point of any type of coexistence, or is it just going to be at odds?
And there's that whole thing about the union, and they're really two halves of one person living one another's lives the way that they are. And so it really does take both of them. Neither of them alone could have done what they needed to do.
I do not see Mitsuha coming up with the idea, we need to blow up a power plant.
I have to admit that plan was, I did not expect that from those characters. Wait, you want to do what now?
I loved Sayaka in that part. She's like, we're criminals.
And she's being taken away from the school sobbing.
Oh, she was great. Yeah. Oh yeah. Loved it.
Is it me, or was the one friend, what was his name?
Teshi.
Teshi. Was he just a little bit too eager to blow stuff up?
Yeah.
He should never been trained on demolitions to begin with.
Who wouldn't want to blow stuff up is my question.
Yes. I'm right there with you, but the thing that they blew up, okay, so my father is a 40-plus year master electrician, and when I saw that they were blowing up a substation, I about came out of my seat.
It was going to blow up anyway. The comet was headed right for it.
It's different. Okay, being vaporized is one thing. I've seen the videos and I've heard the stories of what happens when substations malfunction, much less have dynamite blow up inside of them. And it's like, no, oh.
I don't know anything about a substation blowing up. I know what happens when a transformer catches fire inside the tunnel in the T, and man, that smoke is visible several stations down.
I just remember the time I was driving and I saw a bolt of lightning hit a transformer in front of me.
Ooh.
It made a unique noise. I don't think I've ever heard that noise before in my life, and I probably won't ever hear it again.
There are some pitches you'll never hear again.
Yeah.
I remember when one went up here and the entire state of California burned down.
In all reality, it's a good thing the comet did hit, because otherwise most of that mountain might have caught on fire.
Yeah.
So moving on. Anyway, electrical horror stories aside.
Right, we wanted to end this up, James.
Any other characters that we wanted to talk about?
I'll just say this. I loved the fact that it ended with Okudara being a buddy story. That just thrilled my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked her a lot.
I did like the scene where we're introduced to her, where she saves Mitsuha and Taki's body from the rude scam artist customer. When we see him pull out the safety blanket, what was the point of that? And we see that he cut her dress. I'm like, okay, first jerk move. Who even does that? And
after he got what he wanted.
Exactly.
Right.
And Mitsuha takes her, like, here, come with me. Okay, take off your skirt. What?
I shall embroider you a hedgehog in flowers.
Yes, he fixes it, embroiders it. I'm like, huh. I bet you there's all sorts of weird thoughts going through Okudera's head right now. Because not only did she fix it, or did he fix it, he made it cute. This became an incredibly cute little scene. So, do we have any final thoughts about Your Name?
So many thoughts, but we don't have time.
Go watch it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I will.
Probably watch it a fourth time right after we're done.
So one question I had for all of you, because this was my first time seeing this movie, and actually first time seeing anything by Makoto Shinkai. Other movies that got recommended to me through Prime were two of his other films, Weathering with You, which, Mike, you've brought up before, and I think you have as well, Bex, and another one called Fireworks. I tried watching the trailers for these two movies, which was a huge mistake because they told me absolutely nothing of what they're about. Have you seen either one of them? Are they worth it? Or was Your Name kind of the peak?
Well, yes to both. Your Name was the peak, and I can't speak for Fireworks, but Weathering with You I enjoyed.
Yes, Your Name is definitely the Spirited Away for Shinkai. There's nothing, even though you're going to love a lot of his other works, nothing compares to Your Name.
Just because it's the best doesn't mean the others are inherently bad.
Correct.
Okay.
And I haven't seen Fireworks. I don't know what that is.
Let's watch that after, Bex, and then we'll hit Twitter, and then we'll figure out.
And see if it's worth it.
I actually don't think I could view it tonight, but.
Sounds like a plan. Well, if that is going to finish up our conversation on Your Name, which I think we all came to the conclusion, if you haven't watched it, go watch it now. If you have watched it, you really need to watch it again. Let's head to the zombie apocalypse plan of the week. And Mike, I think you're going to have a guest stepping in to help us with that one. So Bex, take it away.
All right. Well, my plan is threefold. Okay. So people fear what they don't understand, right? So, and zombies are just doing what they do. So we need to take the fear away by first changing the language. So stop using buzzwords like apocalypse and outbreak and start using terms like population growth and habitat expansion. Okay, so then part 2.
This isn't the end of the world. This is an opportunity.
Exactly. So part 2, then we need to create an organization or foundation, whatever you want to call it, that would be responsible for securing, containing, and protecting the zombies. Now, I know we're not in the zombie population growth right now, but we have the technology to 3D print steak. So why not 3D print brains?
Oh my God.
We could mass...
This has got to be better than toe frames.
I was going to say toe frames becomes a reality.
So we could mass produce it, patent and package, and sell it to the general population. So you too could feed and care for your own zombie. We could call the product, I don't know, Soylent Green, or no, we can't call it Soylent Green because Soylent Green is people. So we'd have to call it something different. But you know what I mean? Zombies are just trying to survive like everyone else. So there you go.
Oh my gosh, now we have set up zombie habitat preserves. This.
Well, I'm just really looking forward to the David Attenborough special.
Yes.
Here we see the zombie in its native habitat.
He smells us. Go, 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 go.
I really wish Steve Irwin was still alive. Woo! Take a look at this mate. Oh, he's shambling forward. Now, you can tell this one's been dead for at least 25 years. But look at him. Oh, bless him. He's still up. Oh. Easy, mate. He's one walled unit.
Careful. They'll bite you. They'll bite you good if you're not careful.
The Zombie Hunter by Steve Irwin.
No, the zombie observer. See, hunter is a bad word. That's a negative word.
Yeah.
Zombie observer.
Also the name of their monthly newsletter.
Yes.
Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for us this episode. I want to thank you all for listening in. I especially, once again, want to thank Bex for hanging out with us this episode. Once again, this has just been an absolute blast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I greatly enjoyed it.
So did we. Once again, let people know where they can find you online.
Oh, sure. You can search for Redeemed Otaku on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We're also on iTunes, which we should show up on any podcatcher. We will be relaunching the podcast here very soon for our grand return or second coming, whatever you want to call it. But so stay tuned. But definitely we're putting some stuff up on YouTube, so go check out our YouTube channel and give us a like and a subscription or whatever it is.
Yay!
And you can find us online at geekatarms.com, at facebook.com/geekatarms. And Mike, what's the Twitter?
We are Arms Creek on Twitter.
Arms Creek?
Wow. Where did that... I think I really...
We're changing it now. It's the name of this is now your Big Fat Greek Podcast.
I am just going to hit Despina's down the street and get some steak tips. I think that's what I'm going to be doing.
We are 3D printed.
This is Mike giving up on the Greek at Arms podcast. How about this? We are Arms Geek on Twitter. Not as much fun anymore.
You can find us through all your usual podcast download places. Give us a like, leave us a review if you would. And once again, from Brian, Mike, James, and Bex, be safe, be blessed, and be geeky.
Thanks for listening to Geek at Arms. Music for this podcast was provided by Incompetech.com. For more, check us out at Facebook.com/Geek at Arms. Give us a like and maybe even subscribe to us on iTunes. That would be awesome.
I'm going to add notes as we go or just jump in here and there on the film itself. Also, because I work in the evenings, I didn't get a chance to watch it till last night.
Like this film.
No wonder you put the notes down.
Well, between 3 kids, weird job. Joy and I, we don't get to watch anything of our own until Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So,
James, this is the reason I told you to watch it 6 months ago.
Yeah, and you should be impressed that it only took me 6 months to get to it.
I thought you were going to say something like, yeah, and you didn't do anything helpful like offer to watch the kids now, did you?
Please, I wouldn't let you watch my kids.
We should have saved this for the show.